So in order to get started in making this granny square vest, we're gonna just make a basic granny square, and we're gonna have to make a total of 51. And that is just for the main part of the vest, and then we're gonna do the ribbing after we connect it. So all the granny squares are gonna be the same technique. We're just gonna be using either one color or two colors for some of the granny squares. I haven't done one of these yet, but I'm gonna do the tutorial using this white and blue color. The technique is totally the same. Obviously switching color, there's just one extra step, and then if you wanna just do one solid color, then you could just leave that step out. And so I'm gonna show you how to piece it together as well, but let's start off with making the granny squares first. I'm using Tom Daly's Made with Love merino wool yarn. He just recently dropped it. I really like it a lot. It has differing weights where one part is really skinny and then the other is really thick. So it might be a little hard to see because of that, but if you know how to do a basic granny square, that's all this is. So we're gonna start off with a basic slip knot. And then we're gonna do a chain 4. And then once we do the chain 4, you're going to count back to your first stitch, and you're going to insert your hook and make a slip stitch. And what this does is create a circle that we're going to work back into to start the granny square. So you can start off by chaining 3, yarn over, and we're going to go back into that circle here and make a double crochet. And now since we already did a chain 3, that's going to count as a double crochet. So we're going to work in clusters of 3. So once you do that, we're going to chain 3 again. And that will count as the corner. So now we're going to yarn over and make another cluster of 3 double crochets. So go back into that circle and make your first double crochet. Go and make your second. And your third. So once you make your third, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to chain 3. And then you're going to yarn over and make another cluster of 3 double crochets. Okay, so I did my other cluster there, and then once you finish that, you do your chain 3. And this is going to be the last cluster we do before moving on to the next row. And so you're going to yarn over and make your last 3 double crochet clusters. Okay, and once you make your last bunch of cluster stitches, you're going to chain 3. And we're going to find the third chain that we made at the beginning. So count 1, 2, 3. And it's going to be this one right here. And we're just going to make sure to go through both loops, yarn over, and slip stitch. Right here. And usually what you do is yarn over and slip stitch through, but we're going to change colors to the blue now. So we're going to finish off with the blue color. So now when switching to the blue color, don't cut your white yarn because we're just going to carry it over when we go back. Just finish that slip stitch with the blue yarn. and give a nice pull to the tail end so that it stays tight. And now what we're going to do is chain 4. You're going to find your first chain space and you're going to place 3 double crochets here. And then once you place your 3 double crochets, we're going to chain 3 since we're at the corner. And then we're going to place 3 more double crochets into this chain space. And now once you do that, we're going to chain 1. And that is because we're going to put a space in between this cluster here. So you chain 1 every time you have a cluster that you need to go in between. You're going to yarn over and make 3 double crochets into this chain space. Okay, now once you make your 3, we're going to chain 3. And then we're going to yarn over and place 3 double crochets into that same chain space. And then since we have a cluster here, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to place 3 double crochets into this chain space. Okay, now once you do that, you're at a corner, so that means you're going to chain 3, and then you're going to place 3 double crochets into that same chain space. Chain 1 in between this cluster, and then what we're going to do is do our 3 double crochets into this chain space. And now for the end, what we're going to do is chain 3, and instead of making 3 double crochets into this chain space, we're only going to make 2 because we did a chain 4 here at the beginning because we needed a chain 3 so that we could connect it back to this cluster over here, and then there's an extra chain 1 space in between the cluster. So go ahead and chain 3, yarn over, and make 2 double crochets into this cluster, into this chain space. Now, once you do that, you're going to count up 3 stitches, just like we did before. 1, 2, 3. And you're going to insert your hook, and then you're going to insert your hook, and then instead of finishing with the blue yarn, you're going to finish with the white yarn. And at this point, you could go ahead and cut off the blue yarn. I like to pull it like that. It's just easier. I don't have a scissor on me, but once you cut that, you could go ahead and carry over the white yarn and finish off that stitch with a slip stitch. And then you're going to go ahead and chain 3. And you're going to yarn over and make 2 more double crochets into that chain space. And that gives us 3, including that chain 3. So we're going to chain 1 in between the cluster and make 3 double crochets into this chain space. And now we're going to chain 3 and then make 3 double crochets into this chain space. At this point, you know what to do. Every time you're at a corner, you chain 3 and then you place another cluster of double crochets into that same stitch. And then between every cluster, you chain 1 and so on. And then once you get to the end, I'll show you what to do next. Okay, so I got up to my last cluster here, and you're gonna make a regular cluster of 3 double crochets into this last chain space here. And then once we do that, we're gonna chain 1 and connect it to this one. Okay, so once you make your cluster, go ahead and chain 1, and you're gonna count 3 chain spaces, and you're gonna slip stitch, cut your yarn, and you can fasten off. And that is one granny square. Now, what you're gonna do if you wanna follow this pattern exactly is you're gonna make 4 different granny squares. It's all the same technique, you're just gonna change colors in a different way. So you're gonna start off with the blue and then to white instead of white then to blue like we just did. And then for these, you just do blue the whole way or white the whole way, which is much easier. If you want to follow my pattern exactly, you're going to make 14 of these, 12 of these, 12 of these, and 13 of these. Go ahead and make all of those, and once you do, come back and I'll show you how to shape the whole thing together. So I already pieced the front piece here together, but it's going to be the same exact thing for the back, except for the back, you're just going to add 1 granny square in between here. And for the front, this is going to be the neckline, so you leave it empty. So the front and the back are the same. So you could just line up your granny squares the way I did here. And we're going to sew them together. We're going to sew 2 together, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5. So we're going to make them into rows, and then we're going to sew along this way. So I'm going to show you how to sew 2 together, and then it's the same process. You're just going to keep doing it once you get 5 in a row. And then you're going to do the same for each set going down, but you're only going to do this for a total of the 20 granny squares. And then we're going to connect on top the 3 and then the 2. So you could do the same thing that you did for these in connecting them, but just do 3. And then you're going to do the same exact thing again, but you're just going to connect one of those to one of those. So in order to connect, you're going to do the right sides together here, and you're going to try to match them up accordingly so that they match perfectly. It helps if you get a stitch marker and place it in that last turning chain point, because you know that is where the end of the row is there. And then you could again start where that chain space begins on the other side, and we'll begin sewing it together. Okay, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, so it doesn't really matter what color you use to sew them together, but I like to use the same yarn just to stay consistent. And so you're gonna go into that first chain space rather on both corresponding sides. And you're gonna grab your yarn, pull through, and chain 1 to secure. And then you could pull the tail end of it so it tightens and secures even more. And now we're going to work into the loops here. So I'm going to work into the front loop of this white side and then the back loop of this blue side. And that way the middle 2 stitches are showing and it's a clean kind of seaming that you see on the right sides together. So go ahead and insert it into that front loop, and then find the corresponding stitch on the next side and go into the back loop. Okay, now yarn over, and we're going to slip stitch through all those loops. And now you're going to continue doing that with each corresponding stitch until you reach your stitch marker. And once you reach your stitch marker, you're just going to fasten off like we did throughout the project. And then you're going to keep on connecting and connecting going down. So just see the pattern that I showed you before and mimic that in sewing these together. And then you're going to do the same thing once we get up to sewing the rows together, but I'll show you how to do that once we get there. It's the same exact process where you just line them up evenly, and then go down and a slip stitch seam in the front and back loop. So it doesn't really matter what color you use to sew them together, but I like to use the same yarn just to stay consistent. And so you're going to go into that first chain space rather on both corresponding sides. And you're going to grab your yarn, pull through, and chain one to secure. And then you could pull the tail end of it so it tightens and secures even more. And now we're going to work into the loops here. So I'm going to work into the front loop of this white side and then the back loop of this blue side. And that way the middle two stitches are showing, and it's a clean kind of seaming that you see on the right sides together. So go ahead and insert it into that front loop, and then find the corresponding stitch on the next side and go into the back loop. Okay, now yarn over, and we're going to slip stitch through all those loops. And now you're going to continue doing that with each corresponding stitch until you reach your stitch marker. And once you reach your stitch marker, you're just going to fasten off like we did throughout the project. And then you're going to keep on connecting and connecting going down. So just see the pattern that I showed you before and mimic that in sewing these together. And then you're going to do the same thing once we get up to sewing the rows together, but I'll show you how to do that once we get there. It's the same exact process where you just line them up evenly, and then go down and a slip stitch seam in the front and back loop. Okay, so I just pieced together the back side, and here it is in comparison to the front side. Same thing with the addition of that additional square, the white square right there. Hi, Sami. Okay, so now I sewed all of these in rows. So now what you're gonna do is just flip them over right sides together, and you're gonna do the same exact thing you were doing, line square, the white square right there. Hi, Sami. Okay, so now I sewed all of these in rows. So now what you're gonna do is just flip them over right sides together, and you're gonna line up the first chain spaces on the corresponding sides, and then you're gonna go all the way down and find the last ones as well. And then you're just gonna place a stitch marker into the last one. And then you're gonna begin slip stitch seaming like we just were doing into the back loop and front loop only of both sides, and go all the way down. And then you're gonna continue doing this, flipping over on the right side to each piece. And this one has just the first three, obviously, because these are where the armholes begin, and then so on. And then once you connect all the pieces, we'll be ready to connect the shoulders and then the body. Okay, so I finished the front and the back here. I actually blocked the front already, so you could already see how much of a difference that makes. This is like still crumpled up, but we're gonna sew them together, and I'm just gonna block this one once I finish the whole piece. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna sew down this line and down this line and then the shoulder pieces as well. So all you have to do is keep this front piece on its right side up and then flip the back piece over on its right side facing the front side. And then like we've been doing, we're gonna slip stitch seam. All you're gonna do is match up the beginning chain spaces here and then stitch mark the last chain spaces that correspond here at the end. And then you're gonna do the same thing on this side. And then the only other part we're gonna sew is the shoulders. So you have 3 on top here for the back piece and then 2 for the front. You're just gonna sew the corresponding ones together, leaving the middle one by itself. And then we're gonna make the neckline and the ribbing for the arms after, as well as the bottom. So I just sewed the sides and the shoulders together, and at this point just try it on to make sure it fits. It's definitely going to be a bit on the larger side, which is good because there needs to be room for us to do the ribbing, because when we do it the stitches do tighten a bit. So at this point I'm going to show you how to do the ribbing. It's going to be in the white color just because I have more of that, but you could do whichever color you like. And usually I like to keep the ribbing the same throughout, but I'm gonna do the ribbing on the bottom half a bit bigger than the ribbing for the underarms and the neck. Okay, so I'm gonna start with the ribbing for the neck here, and it's gonna be the same process throughout. So once you see how to do this, you can do it for the arms and the waist area. So you're gonna take the yarn that you're working with, and you can insert at any point in any one of these stitches. It doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to go into this corner right here. So I'm just going to go into the top shoulder piece just so I kind of remember where I started. And I'm going to go right at that seam. And I'm going to go ahead and pull my yarn through and chain 1 to secure that, and then pull the tail end a bit. And now I'm going to go ahead and chain 5. And now what we're going to do is we're going to work single crochets into the chains that we just made. So what we're going to do is we're going to skip that first chain that we made and go into the second one here. So we're going to skip this first one and go into the second one here. And we're going to make a single crochet. And now you're going to make 4 more single crochets going down the chain that you just made. Okay, and once you get to your last stitch, what we're going to do is we're going to go into the next stitch here, and we are going to slip stitch. And then we're going to go into the next stitch, which is right here, and we're going to make another slip stitch. And then you're going to turn your work, and then you are going to skip those 2, and then you're going to skip those 2 slip stitches that you just made, 1, 2, and then you're going to continue making a single crochet into the back loop only of those stitches that you just made. So go down to the end of the row, and when you get to that last stitch, you are just going to chain 1 and turn your work again. And now what you're going to do is you're just going to keep doing this same pattern that you've been doing, working 5 back loop only single crochets, and then once you get to this part, you slip stitch into the next 2 stitches, turn your work, skip those 2 stitches, and then make 5 back loop only single crochets, chain 1, and turn. So you're going to keep doing that all the way until you get to your starting point, and I'll show you how to seam them together. It's basically the same way that we've been doing, slip stitch seaming through the back loop and front loop only. You are just going to do it on the wrong side because you don't want these seams showing on the right side. So this was my starting point, and this is where my last row ended. So all you have to do is connect the first row with the last row. And since we're on the right side, you're not going to slip stitch seam them the way we've been doing. You're just going to flip it over on itself like this. And you are going to slip stitch seam in the front loop and back loop only the way we've been doing, down, connecting the both two together. Just make sure it's on the wrong side. That's all you have to do. And once you're done with that, you are all done with the sweater vest. Here is the sweater once it is completely finished, washed, and blocked.